In a world where the cunning dominate and the naive are ruled, the real threat isn't weakness, it's ignorance masked as virtue. Today we uncover 6 defining traits of the foolish man. Why? Because ignorance is not innocent. It topples civilizations, wrecks dynasties, and destroys individual destinies. If you fail to spot these patterns in others and in yourself, you will use broken and erased. As Machiavelli once cautioned, a ruler who keeps fools around him will soon become one. In every gathering, in every negotiation, in every subtle exchange between men, one fatal illusion persists: that kindness is protection. The foolish man wears his virtue like armor, convinced it will shield him from betrayal, cruelty, and the ruthless hunger of ambition. He assumes that if he treats others with decency, he will receive the same in return. That showing respect guarantees respect, that by lowering his defenses, others will only follow suit. But that's not how power is won. The fool believes compassion makes him honorable. In truth, it paints a target on his back. Notice his public behavior: apologizing for imaginary offenses, tolerating insults masked in civility, accepting unfair terms that undermine his worth, and laughing awkwardly when his boundaries are crossed. He calls it empathy. The strong call it fragility. He fails to realize that to the calculating, unguarded kindness is not noble. It's a weakness waiting to be exploited. A wise man can act with kindness, but only when it serves a calculated end. He can be generous, but never to the point of self-sacrifice. The foolish man gives endlessly, forgives indiscriminately, and trusts blindly. He believes his pure intentions will heal the world. In reality, they only determine how easily the world will exploit him. Now observe how predators swarm around him. The manipulator praises him. The opportunist probes his limits. The narcissist drains him. And what does the fool do? He keeps giving, believing his virtue will eventually be acknowledged. But influence is not awarded through sympathy. It is seized with clarity, strength, and deliberate action. He becomes the man who extends favors before they're earned, the one who agrees when he wishes to decline, the one who is always accessible, always agreeable, always desperate to belong. He was raised to believe kindness ensures safety, but no one taught him the truth that the world does not honor the good-hearted, it exploits them. The more he compromises, the harder others push. The more he gives, the more he is dismissed. And the harder he works to be liked, the more invisible he becomes to those who truly hold power. He lacks edge, has no boundaries, and no intensity behind his eyes. So when the predators appear, sign number 2, he talks more than he thinks. The foolish man cannot remain silent. He treats quiet not as strength, but as a burden. Words pour out of him, not from necessity, but from a fear of being unheard. He speaks to gain approval, to be acknowledged, to feel accepted. But in doing so, he turns himself into easy prey, loud, exposed, and entirely predictable. Observe him in a group of strangers. Within minutes, he reveals too much. His thoughts, his insecurities, his ambitions, his doubts. He shares his strategies, his frustrations, even his vulnerabilities, believing that being open equates to being real. But openness in the wrong company is not brave. It's reckless. A man without control over his tongue is a man without control over his destiny. Where the wise remain quiet to observe, the fool fills every silence with sound. While the shrewd gather insight by watching, the fool turns himself into a spectacle. His desperation to impress guarantees his failure. He believes that revealing his mind will earn him admiration, but every sentence becomes ammunition for those who listen with intent to exploit. He fails to grasp the reality that power operates in quiet, that the most dangerous presence in a room is rarely the one making noise, that those who speak least perceive the most. The fool exposes his intentions like a commander yelling battle plans before the fight. He shares his views too soon, alienating allies. He reveals emotions too easily, inviting manipulation. And he proclaims ambition too loudly, awakening rivals who had been dormant. He boasts about victories not yet won. He complains about challenges instead of addressing them. He pledges loyalty to people testing his resolve. He shares his wounds, his jealousy, his shame, believing that honesty is strength, when in fact it's a blueprint for those intent on his downfall. The more he talks, the less he's respected. The more he discloses, the easier he is to exploit. Every word spoken phrased the fabric of his presence, his pride, his power. He may think he's forging connections, but what he's truly doing, sign number 3, is giving trust without scrutiny. For the wise, trust is a weapon earned only after trials, consistency, and time. For the foolish, trust is given by default. He hands it out freely without discernment. He assumes goodwill in others simply because it feels righteous to do so. And by doing so, he walks straight into the hands of those who smile sweetly while sharpening their blades. The foolish man assumes goodwill is everywhere, that people's words mirror their intentions. He accepts apologies instead of noticing patterns. He forgives before he understands. He offers loyalty to those whose true selves he's never even questioned. He doesn't challenge character. He doesn't apply pressure to see the truth. He doesn't analyze how people respond under stress. No, he trusts blindly because it feels noble to do so. Then watch how quickly he becomes a pawn. He shares secrets with people he barely knows. He loans money to anyone who flatters him with just the right tone. He enters partnerships based on charm. He opens up to people who haven't earned a shred of that trust. And when betrayal strikes, when the deception becomes impossible to ignore, he calls it bad luck. But it wasn't destiny that turned on him. It was his refusal to vet those he let get close. He mistakes charm for character. He takes charisma as truth. He sees what he wants to see because his ego insists he must be right. He believes that trust equals affection, or worse, that it equals virtue. But in reality, trust is a deal. It must be earned, purchased with consistency, patience, and testing. Anything less isn't trust at all. It's delusion disguised as virtue. The man with power observes before he engages. He listens. He takes his time. He tests in small doses and watches how others respond. But the fool jumps in. He hands over access before he knows who he's dealing with. And when the outcome is betrayal, he's stunned as though it came out of nowhere. He doesn't ask hard questions. He doesn't look close enough. He never suspects that the brightest smiles might be masks worn by the most cunning deceivers. Sign number 4, he craves validation, not respect. There's a critical difference between a man who wants respect and one who simply wants to be liked. The first commands influence. The second chases approval. And the fool, he almost always chooses the second. He will abandon his values, suppress his instincts, and trade his dignity just to hear a compliment or see a nod of approval. He doesn't realize that those who beg to be liked are never truly respected. The fool enters a room silently pleading through every gesture and every tone, "Please like me." He agrees even when he disagrees. He laughs at jokes that demean him. He flatters those above him, even if he resents them in silence. Why? Because he equates being liked with being safe. He believes that universal approval means immunity from harm. But that's not how reality operates. The man who chases approval will forever be at the mercy of those who offer it. One compliment binds his loyalty. One criticism ruins his mood. A single disapproving look is enough to shake his confidence. His entire sense of worth is built on external validation. And so he becomes a puppet, waiting, longing, begging for someone to deem him worthy. You'll notice how often he over-explains, how quickly he apologizes for things he didn't do, how willingly he aligns with the majority, even when it contradicts his own convictions. He believes it's better to blend in than to stand alone. And so he fades into the background, just another indistinct figure who never challenged, never opposed, never led. Those he tries to impress may return a polite smile, but behind it, there is nothing. Real respect is forged through boundaries. It is earned through discretion, through restraint, through mystery, but the foolish man exposes everything, believing that sheer vulnerability will earn admiration. Instead, it makes him ordinary and easily replaced. The powerful do not chase praise. They become the example others look up to. But the fool, he waits for compliments, like a child waits for sweets. He crumbles under rejection. He cannot tolerate distance. He'll sacrifice his dignity just to pull attention back to himself, even if that dignity was the only thing worth respecting. Sign number 5, he reacts from emotion, not from strategy. A man without control over his feelings has no control over his future. The fool doesn't react out of courage or integrity, but out of weakness. His emotions aren't tools, they're shackles. One insult and he erupts. One setback and he folds. One betrayal and he spirals into rage he doesn't know how to channel. This is the man who mistakes emotional intensity for power, when in truth it's the very thing that keeps him failing. He confuses depth of feeling with clarity of thought. But emotions distort perception. They blur the map. They whisper impulsively when caution is needed most. And so the fool ruled by his feelings becomes the easiest man to anticipate. He snaps when provoked. He panics when things go wrong. He celebrates too soon, mourns too loudly, and shows his entire strategy before the game has even begun. Watch him when insulted. Instead of responding with calm calculation, he raises his voice. He throws threats. He defends himself as though wounded pride is all he has left. Watch him in defeat. Instead of regrouping in silence, he vents his frustration. He seeks sympathy. He tells anyone who'll listen how unjust life has been, unaware that every complaint only confirms what the strong already know. He lacks the resilience to rise. The man of power learns early the value of restraint, how to pause, assess, and act only when the path is clear. He never steps forward without reading the landscape first. But the foolish man, he's ruled by emotion. If he's angry, he lashes out with poor timing. If he's afraid, he flees without strategy. And when he's excited, he exposes his plans to those most likely to weaponize them. Emotion, while natural, should be felt, not flaunted. But the fool lets his emotions lead. His face betrays his thoughts. He cannot mask his anger. He cannot hide his jealousy. He cannot manage his disappointment. His adversaries don't need to wonder what he feels. It's displayed in every gesture, every glance, every word. They watch him closely, learn his triggers, and pull his strings like a puppet, completely unaware he's being played. Sign number 6, he refuses to accept responsibility for his failures. The foolish man never examines himself. His gaze always turns outward, searching for others to blame. When he stumbles, it's someone else's fault. If he's rejected, he calls it jealousy. If he's overlooked, it must be injustice. He never asks, what flaw within me allowed this outcome? Because such reflection requires self-awareness, something he avoids more than any adversary. He moves through life believing that he's the target of constant schemes. But the truth is harsher. The world isn't conspiring against him, it simply doesn't care. He blames his lack of progress, his hardship, his obscurity on others. It was the system, his upbringing, his supervisor, his friends, destiny. But never once does he admit the most dangerous truth of all, that his poor choices, his undisciplined lifestyle, and his emotional recklessness are the architects of his current misery. And so he stays stuck because no man can fix what he refuses to acknowledge is broken. Growth is impossible when he denies his own shortcomings. Adaptation is unreachable if he always sees himself as the victim. This is the man who resists learning from pain. Yes, he will feel it. Yes, he will suffer. But instead of reflecting, he will shout his suffering to the heavens. He will blame everyone around him, never realizing the true sources within. But he refuses to examine his pain. He won't dissect it like a tactician. He won't harness it like a warrior. He simply complains. The foolish man avoids responsibility like a plague because owning responsibility means he must change. And change requires discipline, energy, and humility. It's much easier to say it wasn't my fault than to face the mirror and admit I failed. That single admission, I failed because I wasn't good enough, is the most terrifying sentence he could ever say to himself. Because once he says it, he must grow. He must evolve. And deep down, he knows he hasn't built the strength to take that journey. So he deflects, he resents others' success. He ridicules those who improve. He surrounds himself with enablers, those who reinforce his delusions. He favors comfort over truth, praise over confrontation. He calls the successful lucky and the loyal disloyal. And all the while he remains blind to the harsh yet obvious truth. His greatest enemy is not external, it is his own unwillingness to take ownership of his life. Now you've seen him, not the obvious fool dressed in rags, but the fool in disguise. The man who thinks himself intelligent, yet exposes his ignorance in every sentence, every emotional outburst, every excuse. He insulates himself in noise and compliments, in illusion. Never silence, never reality. and for that reason he will remain powerless. Machiavelli had no pity for such men. He observed them. He watched as they self-destructed, not in one dramatic collapse, but through 1,000 tiny betrayals of their own potential. The refusal to grow, the aversion to challenge, the obsession with approval, the denial of fault. These are not random flaws, they are patterns, and they are fatal. If you recognize these traits in yourself, you now stand at a turning point. One road is easy. It demands nothing except your pride and a pile of excuses. The other is ruthless. It requires self-discipline, brutal truth, and the will to evolve. Most people will never choose that path. But the rare few who do, they become feared, formidable, respected, unstoppable.